Hey, hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, or whenever you're watching this live. Today is the first story of my new series, which is Feel Good Stories, or in the pod with, or in the hot seat with Sudha Money. Very first guest is no stranger to you if you've been following me. If she's a stranger, then you get to know her more today on this show. What I liked about Katie is that how inspirational her story is. We always say, be honest, be yourself, be this. When the truth is being told, it hurts a lot, and um, we are not ready to face that. For some strange reason, we always put mask, um, at least 80% of the time, which is not right. We should be able to express ourselves. We should be able to express freely our thoughts without affecting other people in the process. That is the point here. As long as you're not hurting other people, being yourself should not be shouldn't be a chore. But sometimes when I hear these stories and you think, oh my God, how are they doing it? One such person, she has been an inspiration, to be frank with. When a friend of mine, or common friend of ours, said, oh, you should speak to Katie, and I was like, oh yeah, I've got to speak to her. You've heard her story in my other show, Expert Interview Series, where she is an ambassador for inclusivity, if I could get that word right, in the workplace. But today it's about her story, why she was who she was for such a long time, or who she was in the past life for such a long time. And when she decided to come out, it would not have been easy chore. It really would not have been easy chore for her to come out. So a little bit about Katie Neves has been a professional photographer and filmmaker for 34 years, but she came out publicly as being transgender after living 48 years as a man. Katie formed Cool to Be Trans, that's her foundation, or the business, to support and inspire other trans people and also educate others. Like commoners, to be frank with, we all struggle with understanding and include people. So she uses humor, she is humorous, to deliver the trans awareness training in an entertaining way. Katie appears regularly in the media, and she's on both ITV's and BBC list of experts. So let's welcome Tracy, Katie. I've already renamed you, Katie. That's me. That's signature. That's I rename everyone's. I don't know where that name came from. Anyway,
Hi, Sandra. Got you back. Hi, Sudha. How you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
All right, thanks. Yeah, lovely to see you again.
Yeah, it's same here. I think you are one of those inspirational person whom I met recently. To be frank with, it's hard not to be inspired by your story. It's hard. It's you're an eye opener for many. I've watched some of your shows which you do with other transgender people. I found it to be very intriguing, and also wanting to know, how can we be equal? Equality is one thing which we all strive to be. We need to have that, but somehow society creates this inequality for some strange reasons. I don't even know whether it's an egocentric, or is it for to feel better? I really don't know the answer of it. So
It's just culture, isn't it? It's just how we're brought up, and basically what I'm doing is just educating people just to show, well, actually, we don't have to go along with what we've always been taught, because actually some of that isn't right. Yeah.
to be frank with, we should not be teaching humanity to the humans. It should come by nature.
I think
You should
I think
never be.
I think a lot of the time we should learn more from children, because the children are born with no prejudice, and it's the prejudice from adults that are taught to children. And so I think
Yes.
with that, it's us adults that are screwed up. The kids are fine.
Absolutely. And another thing which I'm not encouraging in any way or form, but sometimes when we see people who has got Asperger's syndrome or who has got, they are a lot more aware than has normal people, or we call ourselves normal, which we are not most of the time. So it's, or at least I am not normal most of the time, I must say.
What is normal anyway?
Yeah, that is a problem. What is normal? Who is defining that normality? That depends on, that's where the judgment is coming from. And we don't want to be judged, but we by default we judge others by the
Exactly.
way
Yeah.
they speak, by the way they stand, by the way they dress. It's sad. So tell us, I'll be here talking about this for ages. Tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us your journey. And I know your journey is very, what is the right word? Very intriguing for many of us, because 48 years is not the short time
Not really. I am
to
very old.
no. I'm not saying you're old, but I'm saying it's not a short time to deal with this dual nature of, like, I am this person, I'm not that person, I'm this, I'm not that, and it's not easy job, both mentally and physically.
No.
So tell us
Okay.
what is, that means, and
Okay. Well, I think probably the best.
how are you on the other side now?
Okay. Probably the best thing is just to start right back from the beginning. So I was born 51 years ago, and as is still the established custom, I was assigned a sex based purely on my physical primary sex characteristics, i.e.,
Mm,
what was between my legs. I
yeah.
was assigned male at birth, and I was given the name Martin Albert Neves. So that was me, labelled.
Ooh.
I don't look like an Albert, do I? The correct answer is no,
Well,
Sudha.
you know.
So, mind
But
you, I don't look
that's
like a
what they
Tracy
wanted,
either.
right?
So anyway, when I got to the age of about 3 or 4, my head and my heart were telling me something very different to the label I'd been given at birth and my primary
Mm.
sex characteristics. And one of my earliest memories was of my mum catching me trying on a pair of my sister's knickers, and age around 3 or 4. And I remember when I did it, it felt so right. You know,
Mm.
I felt right. But then my mum told me off, and she told me to
Yeah,
take them off.
even at that age.
Oh, yeah. And she told me to take them off. And then for every day of the following week, she would pull my shorts down just to check that I was wearing my own
Oh
pants. And
no.
it was humiliating. And I don't blame my mum for it, because it was the early
No.
70s, and it was just, that's just how it was at the time. And she's a product of a generation. So I don't blame her for it at all. It's just how things were then. But
Yeah.
of course, it was humiliating, and it sowed the seeds for a very long time that what I did there was wrong. It was naughty. It was dirty. It was not what respectable people did. And so
Mm.
the thing is that despite that telling off and that humiliation, the need to cross dress as it was then would always be with me. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so the thing is, throughout my childhood, the urge and the need to do that was always there. And so I used to dress in my sister's clothes in secret whenever I had the opportunity. And whenever I did it, it always felt so right. It felt fantastic. But then those feelings of feeling right were very quickly superseded by feelings of shame and guilt and self-loathing, you know,
Mm.
because I wouldn't. It was many years before I didn't admit to myself that then I was a cross-dresser. You know, it wasn't me. It wasn't what I did. No, I'm not that. I'm respectable. I didn't do that. And so I would make a
Yeah.
promise. I would make a promise to myself that I would never ever do it again, and I'd really try so hard. I really would. And
Yeah.
but the trouble is, however hard I tried to suppress it, the need would always come back, and usually with a vengeance. And this vicious
Mm.
cycle went right on until my mid-20s. And so
Mm.
by my mid-20s, I trained to become a press photographer, and I was working in newspapers down in Kent then, before
Mhm.
moving up to the Midlands when I got a job as a senior staff photographer with the Coventry Evening Telegraph. I stayed there for 5 years before leaving to set up my own freelance photography and video business, which I named after my old male name. So I called it Martin
Mm.
Neves Photography and Film.
Yeah.
And so by my mid-20s, I got a successful business. I got married for the first time. And my photographs were regularly published in national newspapers and magazines. I photographed many notable people and events. I photographed the 1990 poll tax riots in Trafalgar Square. I photographed the Yugoslav civil war in Croatia. Photographed Princess Diana's funeral, and twice commissioned to photograph the Queen inside Buckingham Palace. So I'd got this sort of great reputation built. So things were going well.
Mm.
Um, and it was only in my mid-20s that I finally accepted and embraced the fact that then I was a cross-dresser. And
Mm.
as soon as I did that, it was like a whole weight lifting off my shoulders. I no longer felt guilty about it. And
Mm.
I realized that I had a condition called gender dysphoria, which is a great feeling of unease and distress caused by a mismatch between my gender identity, i.e., what I felt in my head
The
and my
head.
heart, as opposed to my sex characteristics and the label that I'm being given at birth. And the thing with gender dysphoria is that it can vary in intensity and it very often increases over time. And that's what happened with me. And I was completely unprepared for it. But at the
Mm.
time, the level of gender dysphoria was low enough that the occasional cross dressing was enough to satisfy it. And that was fine. So I put it in a box. Basically, I was happy as a man who needed to cross dress. And that was all it was. That was fine. And I was
Mm.
happy like that. And I'd found my happy place. That was fine. So that was all right. Anyway, so my first marriage lasted for 13 years. Although we should have split sooner because my first wife never accepted my cross dressing, and although we went to counselling many times about it, it only papered over the cracks. But there was another thing going against our marriage, and that was that I wanted kids and she didn't, and so. When we were younger, it was less important to me. But as I was getting older, as I was approaching my 40s, it became more important, and I wanted to be a parent. And so there's having that need to be a parent, and then needed to be a dad, and then also the fact that she would never accept my cross dressing. There's those two big things going against it. So I instigated the first divorce. But then
Mm.
while I was going through the first divorce, I then went on to meet a woman who would eventually become my second wife. It was a long time before we did get married because I always said that after the cost and the pain of the first divorce, I always said that I'd never get married again. But
Yeah.
eventually we can propose. Yeah, but anyway, I decided to tell her about my cross dressing on our second date. I thought the first date was probably pushing it. Hello, do
Yeah.
you come here often? Oh, look, we've got matching knickers. It doesn't really work, does it? so, so anyway, um, to my surprise and to my delight, she was okay with it. She was fine with it, but there were conditions attached. She said, as long as I didn't dress more than once a week. But in those days, I didn't because the level of gender dysphoria that I had was low enough that dressing once a week was fine. So that was okay. So that was
Okay.
a tick in the box. And then she said, um, as long as you never want to transition. And I categorically didn't. I really didn't. That is not who I was. I was happy as a man who needed to cross dress. That was it. So that was fine. So our relationship blossomed, and then 9 years ago we had a beautiful baby daughter who was the center of my universe. But it was many years before we got around to getting married, and so we finally got around to getting married in August 2017. However, a few months before we got married, I just happened to meet a spiritual guide and clairvoyant at a business networking meeting. Now, I
Uh-huh.
don't know about you, Sudha, but if you've gone to any business networking meetings, you tend not to meet people like clairvoyants at business networking meetings. You meet
Yeah.
lots of people like accountants and financial advisors and estate agents and utility warehouse salespeople and all that sort of people. Nothing wrong with all those people. I've got lots of friends who are those people. But clairvoyance is just fascinating to talk to. And I
Yeah.
was intrigued by her. And so I was talking to her for most of the evening and really enjoyed our conversation. And I was so intrigued by her that I decided to book up for a reading. Didn't feel the
Mhm.
need for a reading, but I just thought, why not?
Uh-huh.
So I went along. I tell you what, Sue, she just blew me away. She really did. She was amazing. She said so many things that were so true, that were really pinpoint accurate, that she couldn't have found out from my website or my social media or anything. But then she said lots of things that at the time didn't make any sense at all. Now they make
Mm.
perfect sense now, but they didn't make sense at the time. She
Yeah.
said things like a new way of being, and then
Yeah.
there's an issue that you've always known about, but that you're not fully in integrity with. He said, Spirit want you to go off for a long walk in the countryside and talk to yourself, talk to nature, and talk to Spirit, and they will show you what you need to see.
Mhm.
I thought, oh, all right, well, I like walking. What the hell? But I was really busy at the time because I was busy with my work and it was the run up to our wedding and everything. So I didn't have the time to take myself off this really long walk. So
Yes.
in the meantime, we got married in the August 2017, but then it wasn't until very early November 2017 that I did actually find the time to take myself off, and I took myself off to Rutland Water because I love it over there.
Uh-huh.
It's a lovely part of the country, and I worked out this really long route around the southern bit of it, around the countryside, around the south bit, because I didn't want to just
Uh-huh.
go around the water's edge because I wanted to be alone. And I went midweek as well, so there was less chance of meeting people. And I remember it now. It was a beautiful day. It was a blue sky. The sun was shining. But it was a very cold, crisp, clear day. And I went off with my map and my compass and my walking boots, and I was on a mission. I was stomping it out, and I was talking at the top of my voice. I was talking to myself. I was talking to nature, and I was talking to spirit, whoever they were.
I
And I
mean,
remember feeling
it's
I remember
good.
feeling disappointed at the time because I was naively expecting some sort of light bulb moment or some sort of voice to say, "This is what you should be seeing." Strangely, Sudha, that didn't happen. I don't know why.
Yeah. No, it's not. Sometimes we don't accept that as well. Yeah, I'll let you
Yeah.
go on with
So
your story. It's
I
very
thought I thought perhaps I've done it wrong. Perhaps I should have just sat serenely by the water's edge looking out at the reservoir. But strangely, now whether it's a coincidence or not, I really don't know, but it happened. Around about the same sort of time, my gender dysphoria increased dramatically. It
Oh,
went through the roof. So much so that I didn't know what gender I was at all. I really didn't. And I was so desperate to find out that I was even typing into Google, what gender is Martin Neves? Now, I know that's crazy because the answer could only come from me. It couldn't come from anywhere else, particularly
yeah,
Google.
that's true.
But I was desperate. And it's what desperate people do, and that's what I did.
Yeah,
The thing is, I couldn't tell my wife about my inner turmoil because I didn't want to stir up a hornet's nest unnecessarily if it was something of nothing. But
yeah,
then if I did tell her, it would lead to her asking me questions, which at the time I just didn't have the answers to. I just didn't know what gender I was at all. So I just had to face this on my own. So the first thing I decided to do was to get some counselling. And I found a counsellor who had experience of treating people with gender issues. And she was great. She was really good. But we only had 4 sessions. And in hindsight, I think we should have had more sessions. But
oh,
I wrongly concluded at the end of those sessions that I was gender fluid. And I'll explain what that is. So, gender, we're brought up to think about well, we're brought up to think that gender is the same as sex. Well, it's not. Gender is about how you feel in your head and your heart, whereas sex
mhm.
is about your physical sex characteristics and the label you've been given. Um, but both gender and sex aren't binary.
Ah,
There's a whole spectrum. They're not linear either, because some people are asexual, so have no sexuality, and some people are agender, have no
mm,
gender.
mm.
But for simplicity, think of it as a linear thing, just purely for simplicity. Um, Nobody's 100% male and 100% female. They're at either
Yeah,
extremes. We're all on this spectrum in between. And
mm,
non-binary people sit roughly in the middle, so they're not
yeah,
neither male or female. But gender fluid people are roughly in the middle, but some days they feel more female, some days they feel more male. And
mm.
all of these are perfectly normal and natural ways of being human. And
Yes.
That they really are. But we're just brought up in society just to think of it. On the birth certificate, it's got to be this binary, boy or girl. That's it. I mean, it's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And in
Yeah.
some societies now, some cultures, they are actually changing it. I mean, Tasmania was the first. Now in Tasmania, you're not required to put a gender or a sex on the birth certificate. And the thing is,
Mhm.
it's crazy because when you're in terms of putting a sex on there, it takes no account of the baby's gender because it's too early to find out because the baby can't speak. The baby can't tell you what their gender is, and they wouldn't know
Yeah.
at that stage anyway. So it's just this crude sex thing that's put on there,
Yeah.
assuming that sex is the same as gender, but it's not. It's not. But anyway,
Yes.
I'm sort of digressing a bit there. I do waffle on a bit, I
Yes.
know. Sorry.
That's okay. That's very interesting. In India, you must when you explain the spectrum. When I grew up in India, my granny used to say, because I told you about this when we had Uma
Yeah.
Maheshwar, which is a Shiva, one form of Shiva, which is got more male and female. That's how the photograph is. If you see some of the photographs, I can send you one. This is God, right? It's God. So there is always a point, like you will have more male characteristics sometimes than female, and between certain time of the year or month, it changes as well. So it is very interesting to learn that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll let you
absolutely.
start. I talk about that as well.
No, absolutely. No, you're right. So at the time, then I thought I wrongly concluded that I was gender fluid. I now realise why I came to that conclusion, and it was my fear of accepting myself and admitting to myself that I was a transgender woman that was making me hang on to a bit of masculinity that I had, and it was the
Yes.
easiest way that I could think of hanging on to that masculinity by saying that I was gender fluid. So that
Yes.
was that at the time, but at the same time of doing that, I was working my way through a self-help workbook called "You and Your Gender Identity" by a brilliant gender therapist from the States called Dara Hoffman Fox. Fantastic book. And it's like psychotherapy in a book. And there's a lot of work involved. And it took me about 2 months to work my way through it. And by the time I got to about three-quarters of the way through the book, it became obvious that I wasn't gender fluid and that I was, in fact, um, a transgender woman. And then by the end of the book, that hadn't changed at all. So now I had two conclusions, but they were different. So I thought, now what can I do? So I decided to send a text back to the clairvoyant just to see what she had to say. And I should point out at this stage that she's not just some sort of mystic Meg sitting in a caravan with a crystal ball predicting the lottery numbers. Although, to be honest, with the state of my finances at the moment, that would be quite handy. So if any of your
Yeah.
viewers know of anyone
Yeah,
like that, can you put their
give me the
phone
number.
numbers in the chat? Because I
Give
really
me the
need to
number.
know. I've got high expectations here. I'll be very disappointed with no phone numbers. Yeah. So, so, so anyway, so she is actually she's a spiritual healer specializing in clairvoyant healing, and she's a
Did you
healing
go
member.
back to her again?
Sorry.
Did you go back to her?
I did. I'll tell you about
Yes.
that in a minute. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so she's a healer member of the National Federation of Spiritual Healers, which is recognised by the NHS. So she's got some credibility about her. Anyway, she suggested that I go along for what she calls a vision quest session, and I did that on the 11th of January 2018. It's a date I will always remember, and that session, it was a 4-hour interactive process. So it was a big
Oh
old
my
process. It
God.
was. It was a massive process. And she used techniques such as deep meditation to get me into a really relaxed state and to allow me to get past all my truth. Sorry, to get past all my fear and to allow me to access my inner truth. And during that session, she didn't give me any answers at all. She just asked me a series of questions. It was question after question after question after question. It was relentless. It really was. Whether she got the questions from spirit or not, I haven't got a clue. But she just asked me all these questions and she allowed all the answers to come from me and from my inner truth. And it was such an emotional session. I cried buckets that day. I really did. And it was at the end of that session that I admitted to myself that I am a transgender woman and that I need to change my body. And that is when I truly felt female. And that's the point that I felt that Martin had stepped back and Katie had taken over. Or Tracy, as you might say. I'm not going to let you
You can
back
change
down.
the name. And knowing your middle name now, I've got another one coming, Alberta.
So yes. So anyway, that's what I truly felt female. So I had finally discovered my true gender identity. Yeah. So what now? What was I going to do with this piece of information eating away at me?
Yeah.
I had a happy home life and I had a successful business. Could I put all of that in jeopardy just for this new piece of information? On the other
Yeah.
hand, could I go back to living how I was before with this new piece of information eating away at me? Well,
I know.
I didn't think I could, but because the trouble is that once you know your true gender identity, you can't unknow it. That particular genie just wasn't going back in the bottle.
Bottle,
And
yeah.
and the thing is, I didn't want to be trans. No one does, as it invariably involves a lot of loss, pain, and heartache, as well as having to deal with prejudice and bigotry along the way. It's
Oh
not an
God,
easy.
tell me about
It's
it.
not
Yeah.
an easy journey. No
Yeah.
one wants to be trans, but I didn't have a choice. You either are trans or you're not. Yeah, that's the only choice you have. The
Mm,
only, but the so that's it. You are either or you're not. The only choice you have is whether you do anything about it or not, and decide to transition. And
yes.
the research that I did showed that most trans people who decide to transition after the initial loss, pain, and heartache
Hey,
and
heartache.
bumpy journey along the way, usually go on to lead happy and contented lives. Whereas sadly, many trans people who decide not to transition and to live their lives for other people, often they're the ones that end up in a cycle of depression. And so the urge to live my truth was just so overwhelmingly strong. And so I just felt that I had to do this thing. I had to face up to it. I would say man up, but that's probably the wrong thing to say. Terrible phrase. I'll get told off for using that phrase. I only do it to wind people up, to be honest. So my next challenge was to tell my wife. And I don't
Yeah.
mind admitting that was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Well, apart from admit to myself I was trans, that was the hardest thing. And it took me a whole month to pluck up courage to tell her. I was so frightened of telling her. I actually wrote a letter to her just in case my words didn't come out right. In the end, my words did come out right, but I gave her the letter at the end because she was in such shock. It was awful. It was such a bombshell that I dropped on her. I felt
Yeah.
terrible doing it to her. It was awful. It was awful for her. It really was. And I felt awful for doing it. But I just
But
had to.
mind you, you did do her a favor as well.
She didn't feel that
It,
way at the time.
no, it is not nice to be with a person who has got different thoughts going on
Yeah,
in
yeah,
their
yeah,
head.
yeah.
It's not fair.
And the thing is that to make someone else happy, you have to be happy yourself. And so if I was ending up going into a cycle of depression, I certainly wouldn't have done her any favors at all because it would have
Yeah.
been it would have been
Yeah.
horrendous. So yeah, definitely looking back. But anyway, so anyway, obviously the news went down as badly as you would expect. And I should point out at this stage that sexuality and gender are completely separate entities and they're not linked. So in my
Mm,
instance, I've always been attracted to women and I still am. It's been one of the constants in my life. But all that's happened is that the labels changed. So previously I was labeled as a heterosexual man. Now I'm labeled as a lesbian. Well, it feels no different to me. It feels I'm just attracted to women. It's just that's all it is. It feels absolutely no different. But obviously, for my wife, the label hadn't changed, and she's still attracted to men. So there was a mismatch there, and so um, there was obviously an issue that needed sorted. We tried counselling, but sadly that didn't work. So unfortunately, that meant the end of my second marriage. It was a very short marriage, that one. Um, the next challenge I faced was what to do about the name of my photography and video business when I changed my name to Katie because it was very boldly branded after my old
yeah.
male name. It's called Martin Neves Photography and Film. And if you see the branding on it, the Martin Neves is in massive great big letters. It's huge. But the trouble is, at the time, it had been an established brand for 22 years, and I was and still am actually ranked second in the UK out of photographers in the UK on Free Index purely from customer reviews. And so I got all these great reviews and everything. I got a great reputation, and I just felt that if I changed the name of the business to Katie Neves Photography and Film, nobody would know who that was, and so
Mm,
I just felt it'd be like starting from scratch. So it was a very conscious business decision to keep the name of the business the same. But in order to do that, I'd have to detach myself from the name of the business. So instead of being Martin from Martin Neves Photography and Film, I would be Katie from Martin Neves Photography and Film, even though I'm the only person who's working in it.
Yes.
But in order to do that, I had to come out very openly, very honestly, and very publicly as being transgender, and continue to do that. So it was a big decision to make, but I decided to do that. So what I did was I made a coming out video, and I on the 26th of April 2018, I decided to make that public. So I sent it to all my clients and I put it on all my social media. It was a massive risk. And I remember now my finger nervously hovering over the mouse, knowing that as soon as I make that click, my life would never be the same again.
Yeah.
I made the click and I waited. But then I had to go out on a job. But my mind wasn't on the job at all. I took the pictures as quick as I could. I was on autopilot. And the client was very happy with the pictures, but I was on autopilot and I couldn't wait to get back to seeing what was happening on Facebook. I was petrified what was going to happen because my whole livelihood, my reputation, everything rested on the reaction to that one video. It's the single most important video I've ever made. Anyway, I needn't have worried because when I got back, I was inundated with literally hundreds of messages of support. It was amazing. I felt so loved. I didn't do any work for 3 whole days because I was so busy replying to all these lovely messages. It was incredible. And as well as getting lots of lovely messages from friends and from clients, I also got lots of lovely messages from other trans people who said that they'd been struggling with it and that what I'd said had helped them. So they thanked me for it. And that was lovely. There was one particular message that really struck a chord at the time. And that was from a woman whose son had had gender issues when he was going through puberty. And he was being treated for it at a gender clinic for children at the time. And she said that she was worried at the time that he'd either be bullied or he'd self-harm or he'd attempt suicide. And she was right to attempt to say that because as Stonewall's Trans Mental Health Survey of 2012 shows that 48% of trans people in the UK have attempted suicide at least once, and 84% have thought about it. Now, I'm lucky. I'm not one of those. I've never have thought about it. I'm one of the lucky ones. But most of my trans friends have either thought about it or attempted it. So I'm not surprised by those stats. And there's lots of different stats banded around, but that's one of the most shocking ones, certainly. But she said to me, she said, if only there was someone like you out there at the time her son was going through this, just to let him know that it's okay to be trans, because it really is okay to be trans. And that really got me thinking. I thought, I've really got to do some good with this. So I decided to vlog my whole journey and bring people along on the journey with me and demystify the whole process, make it accessible, and just show people that trans people are just ordinary people who want to be safe, loved, and happy, just like everyone else. And that's the
Yes.
entire message. It really is. And what happened, my story was then picked up initially by local radio stations, so I started doing interviews for them, and then local newspapers, and then it escalated, and I started doing stuff for national radio and television and national newspapers and magazines. And so all of a sudden I'd become this trans ambassador, if you like. And that led to me forming Cool to Be Trans, to do trans awareness training, public speaking, and media appearances about it. And I think that that a lot of bigotry and prejudice comes from a fear of the unknown.
Yes.
And if you can take that unknown away, then you're doing a
Mhm.
really good thing. And so I think education is the key here, because the more education there is, then the more acceptance there will be. The more
Yeah.
acceptance there will be, the easier it will be for other trans people to admit to themselves they're trans, because that's the hardest thing. It really is. And then
Yeah,
B,
the Sebastian
the,
is one of the
yes, I know
viewer
Sebastian.
now.
Yeah,
He was saying something about when you self harm and suicide and
absolutely, yeah. And Sebastian's, I know Sebastian's non-binary, so they go on to the pronouns of they and them rather than he and him.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
but yeah, but absolutely. And so where was I now? I'm trying to think where I was now. trying to think where I was.
Oh my God, I stepped in as well. It was
um,
you were telling how bigotry and
that's that's right. So education is the key here. So 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 I just think that the more education there is, the more acceptance there will be, and then the easier it will be for other trans people to admit to themselves they're trans, and then do something about it, and to live their best lives. Because ultimately, that's what we all want to do, isn't it?
yes.
um, and so so I formed Called to Be Trans,
It's
and it
also fear of unknown, as you mentioned.
yeah
That is quite. I think it is all over. Um, Whenever we learn something or we want to go somewhere, we do have that fear. And I, as a tech person, I know that when there is a change or when technology is changing, when the systems are changing, people don't accept it. And
no,
they blame it
absolutely.
on me or the tech
Yeah.
people.
Well,
They are the
there's a
ones who are changing everything.
yeah. Well, there's a
So
whole
it's the
there's a
same. Yeah.
there's a whole theory of the change curve in
Yeah.
terms of people's acceptance and when they go on, and there's a whole theory all about that, definitely. Um, but if you look up Fisher's change curve, you sort of
So
see that
if
it's
you
going.
had to, sorry, if you had to give someone an example of how you have overcome certain challenges, what would be the biggest one? What, apart from telling your loved ones that this is what the
Um,
decision you've made,
well,
outside, we're not that much bothered about outside people initially,
yeah,
and
I think
then you come to a stage where you have
I,
to
I
be
thi-
bothered.
Yeah, I think my biggest piece of advice to people is if they want, planning on doing something big, whether it's in their life or with their business or anything, and they're worried about it, to worry about it is normal, it's human. Just acknowledge that fear, but then go for it anyway. Because most people regret the things in their life that they don't do, not the things that they did do. So I think that's what I would say, and I think a lot of us worry too much about what other people think. Most people
Yes.
couldn't give a damn what other people think. Yeah, I worried. I remember vividly now, and I've been living. When I started living full time as female from what was the 2nd of September when I started living full time as female, and I remember going out on jobs in a dress, for the first time, and I was so worried what people would say. People were absolutely fine. They treated me with respect as a photographer doing my job, and it was absolutely fine. Yeah, most people are absolutely fine and very accepting. I mean, and that's been one of my biggest surprises in all this, in that I don't get problems, I don't get misgendered in the street, I don't get hassle in the street. Yes, I get a lot of abuse on social media, but that's because I'm very public and I put my head well and truly above the parapet. I mean, I couldn't be more out if I tried, really, could I? Yeah. So I know that I'm going to attract that, and things. Social media brings out the worst in people because the anonymity that these social media platforms
Yes.
affords them. They're allowed to have accounts under false names and have these avatars, and so they're not accountable for what they say. So they say some really vile things, and they can get away with it. They're not accountable for it. Whereas I think that social media platforms should be forced to actually get some proof of ID from people. They don't have to display that the real names. That's fine. They can be anonymous but as long as they are accountable for what they say, so that if they do say something that's defamatory, then at least they can be tracked down and held to account. And I think that's
I
very
think the
important.
algorithms should be more tuned for the hatred words.
Mm,
Um, Even though they're doing it, but they're not doing it to the utmost
yeah,
of finding these. And
but even
people
when
are, if they're hiding behind these avatar, I
yeah,
would just block them. You should not be bothered if they can't
yeah,
show
but
their face
yeah, I'm not.
and stand up to their own words.
Yeah, I'm not. I had over 1,000 messages of hate recently, and
Oh my God.
yeah, most of that was on my Call to Be Trans Facebook page, and it was after I wrote an open letter to J.K. Rowling after all the constant stream of transphobia that she's been churning out, and I
She
just
she is another nightmare.
she is, and I just felt that she needed telling, and I felt strong enough to tell her. Whereas most trans people don't. Yeah, and I knew that by doing that, it would attract a lot of hate messages, and they, certainly the transphobes didn't disappoint. They came out in their droves, and I got it, full barrel. Fair enough, that's fine. That's I knew that was going to happen, but I dealt with it, and that's okay. But um,
But mind
please,
you, she only did it. Whether she truly believes what she said or not is second question. And I strongly believe that she did it to put her name forward again because it's gone on the drain. And she wanted a publicity for some strange reason. So the only way to do it is create that hate
well, I
in
don't know.
people.
No, I think she does truly believe it. But I mean, basically, she writes under the pseudonym of Robert Galbraith.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
she writes. She's got. I think it's sort of. Is it crime? I think she writes under, but she writes under the pseudonym of Robert Galbraith for those books. All I'd say to you is, if you were a world famous author, probably one of the most famous authors in the world, and you were picking a pseudonym to write under, you do your research very carefully about that name, just to make sure there's no negative connotations. And all I'd say
Yeah.
to you and to the viewers is just to put into Google the name Dr. Robert Galbraith and see what comes up.
Okay.
Okay,
I've
so
got to take this one.
there's your homework. All right, and now it could be a coincidence, but if you were the most famous author in the world, I think you'd be a bit more careful, unless you actually meant what it was. Okay, so yeah,
It is. I don't like people who are in the influential chair.
no,
Journalist, media people, they all in that chair, and
hmm.
they have to have that control over free speech and hate speech has got two different meanings, and they
Oh,
should know that.
absolutely. And the thing is, I mean, I've got nothing against J.K. Rowling as an author. I think she's a brilliant author. She's very
Yeah.
successful. She deserves all the success that she's had. That's fine. That's one thing. But I think she's abusing her big following that she's got. She's got such
Yes.
a massive following. She's abusing that and churning out this hate, and she's putting out misinformation about trans people, and she is harming people. And I know for a fact, because I've got contacts who volunteer and trustees with Mermaids Charity, which is a charity that supports transgender children and their families. That trans children, several trans children, have attempted suicide um, as the sort of straw that broke the camel's back, if you like, after J.K. Rowling has made all the comments that she did. She
Oh,
is
really?
harming people. She really is. And so that's why I felt the need to stand up to her. And I just thought,
I
well,
mean,
I think,
I strongly believe you don't need to justify why you need to stand up to her. But what she said is wrong, even
yeah.
for normal people.
What do you mean, normal
When she
people?
mentioned, it's what I mean by that is who are not in the transgender
Cisgender is
section.
the word. The word for that is cisgender. Most people don't know what
Cisgender.
cisgender is.
Okay, there you go.
Cisgender, yeah, yeah, yeah. Please don't
So
use, because on
what?
the last count I thought I was normal. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Sudha.
Oh, sorry,
I
it's
hate to pull
not.
you up on
It's just
this.
me.
Just a bit of trans education going on here.
Yeah, I do need it, but I saw a very good LinkedIn article. As I said, I've been on and off detoxing last week, and I saw this and I saved it. So I've got to go back and read that in full detail of what the words are. Normal doesn't exist. Yeah, that's right. Normal doesn't exist, Sebastian. So what she said was wrong. This is where I get so wound up when people in media says free speech, free speech. What is free speech? And what is hate speech? They
Yeah,
convert the hate speech into free speech. They don't
yeah,
even think twice.
yeah,
Oh,
and that's
that's
what.
free. I can say whatever you want. You can say as long as you're not hurting other people.
That's why it's worrying what's going on in government at the moment with this free. They're classing this thing as a free speech thing. I'm a bit. I'm dubious about it, to be honest, because I think it's going to give power to people who want to promote hate speech and
Yeah,
and to use it.
that's exactly
And
what it's giving.
Yeah, and I'm all for free speech. I absolutely am. I mean, especially
Yes.
having worked in newspapers for many years and everything. I'm absolutely up for free speech, but not hate speech. You shouldn't be
Yeah.
harming people.
And
And
people who are advocating for the free speech are all hate speech
exactly, and thing is that so many
speakers,
people,
hate
so,
speakers.
so many people put out this misinformation. They talk about trans people and trans children, uh, but they don't know about the subject. They perhaps never even met a trans person or a trans child, or don't know them. And they're putting their opinions out there, but they're not putting the facts out there, and it's damaging us. It really is. And so that's why I do what I do, just to show people that trans people are just ordinary people, even normal people
Yeah,
who
normal
want to be
people. Oh,
happy.
thank you. You have to quote me on that. And she keeps saying normal, and she cannot define what normal is. That's what I am at the moment. Uh, but what I found out is recently, as you say, yes, the tech platforms, social media platforms should need algorithm revival about these hate speeches and the words which they use subtly to hurt people. At the same time, it is also other people who are reading those comments, they need to stand up as well. They
Yeah,
don't have to be quiet
yeah.
and saying, oh, I'll just ignore them. Ignoring those things is not going to
No,
work.
no, absolutely. I think there's two things there. I think it's not just about the algorithm. I think more so it should be about the way that social media platforms react to complaints. Now, recently, I had, well, it's only yesterday actually, I reported a person for making transphobic comments on Twitter. And Twitter, I mean, it's pretty vile at the best of times, isn't it? Let's face it. There's a lot of hate going on there, but I'll give Twitter their due. I reported them, and within on the same day that I got a confirmation back saying that thanks for reporting it. And then the same day they actually put a restriction on and deleted that comment, and restricted that account that it came from. So they admitted, so that they dealt with it very quickly and efficiently. So I was really impressed with that. However,
No, Twitter is
face
changing recently.
yeah. However, Facebook, on the other hand, they're
No.
the worst at the moment. They're terrible. I mean, all that thousand messages of hate that I got on my Cool to Be Trans Facebook page, I I reported, deleted, and blocked all those people. And do you know how many clicks it takes to delete, report, and block a post
About
on
four,
Facebook?
four or five?
16.
Oh my God.
And I had to do that
Is
for a
that?
thousand. I had to do that for 1,000 of them. They make it so difficult. And then when you do it, Facebook very rarely take any action now. There were some clearly highly transphobic comments, and they didn't do a thing. They are absolutely useless now. They used to. They used to care about it. They don't now. They need to clean up their act. They really do.
Yeah, they need to. They're on the media all the time now because
Mm,
of something which is happening in Australia, and then they
yeah.
change and they keep changing it, which is not going to help them.
No.
And mind you, this pandemic is helping them in a way. For not doing the things which they are supposed to be doing as well. They complain, oh, we don't have that many staff. What the heck?
Well,
You're a tech
yeah.
company
I
with
think.
the billions
I
and
think.
billions of dollars.
I think a lot of people are hiding behind their inefficiencies because of COVID. I think it's very convenient for a lot of people, actually.
Yes, it is. I
Yeah.
agree with that one. Twitter is changing a little bit, but the Instagram is joining the Facebook because
Well,
obviously they are in
it's
the
part of the
same.
same group, isn't it? So yeah.
So they're not being any good either, which
No.
is annoying. When you
Mm.
rely on these platforms, I am one of those tech people who really say there is always good and bad in everything. A knife could be used to cut the vegetable to nurture someone,
Mm.
and it could be cut to kill someone
Yeah,
as well. So
absolutely.
there
Yeah.
is always a two sides to it,
Of
but
course.
where the balance stays has to happen at someone responsible for
Mm. But I
creating
think,
that
these social
control.
media platforms have a responsibility, and a duty of care, frankly, because they're allowing hate speech and not doing anything about it. And they're making plenty of money out of it. They like all these arguments to be going on, because the more arguments that go on, then the more adverts they can sell. And these popular
Conversation,
posts,
the
they sell more ads.
conversation.
So they make loads of money out of people arguing with each other. They love people to have arguments. So
Yeah.
that's why they don't want to stop people having arguments.
Yeah. Oh, you've given me a very good, even though I know that, but I have not used it in one of my.
Mm,
There was a question yesterday about it, but you've given me that thought. So, what would you say to someone who is not a transgender, but they either have a friend who is planning on coming out, or who they might have a family member who is planning on coming out? What would you say to those people? How can they deal with this?
okay.
It is going to be shock for them as well, right?
It is. It is. And the thing is,
Reasonably slow.
yeah, and I think the main problem comes between the two, because it's a bit of a cliche, but we're all on a journey with this.
Yes.
The thing is that trans people, when they're at the start of their transition, they're way ahead of everybody else in their journey, because they will have had years usually of this gender dysphoria and building up. It's like a pressure cooker, and all of a sudden, all the pressure builds up and it explodes, and then all of a sudden, you're going out there and you're starting your transition. You want to be going 100 miles an hour. You've decided, you've made this big decision in your life that you are going to do something about it. You want to crack on with it, and you've got the gender dysphoria, driving that. But for cisgender people and all the relatives and friends and the relatives, they're at the starting blocks. They haven't had that gender dysphoria driving them on. They usually know nothing about their relatives or their friends, gender dysphoria and their other life and all the rest of it. They haven't had all of that. And so all of a sudden, they've got their trans relative just sort of saying, look, this is who I am. I'm going for it. And they're well, we don't know anything about it. They haven't been educated in it. And so it is really hard for them. And I think it's difficult for trans people to acknowledge that, but I think it would help. I mean, I probably didn't. But looking back, I think it would be a useful thing to do, to recognize that. But I think for cisgender people, so non-trans people, I think the thing to do is to get them to educate themselves about the subject as quickly as they possibly can, and just acknowledge that it's hard. It's really hard for trans people to come out as being trans and to tell them, and acknowledge that, and just and support them, just show their love and support for trans people, because it is a really hard journey, and so they're going to need all the support they can get. And so all we can ask for is their love and support, and if they do that, they can't go far wrong, really. And they just need to realize that like, we're exactly the same person on the inside. So even though I look different, so I've got a different identity, I've got a different name, I'm still exactly the same person on the inside. I've got the same skills, the same experience, the same sense of integrity, the same sense of humor, however warped. I'm still exactly the
Yeah.
same person, but I'm far, far happier. And I've also got cravings for chocolate now too, but it's a girl thing. Yeah, yeah. But
It's no. I think everyone, chocolate is for everyone. People who doesn't like chocolate, there's something wrong with them.
I have to have my emergency chocolate in the fridge now. Now I
Oh,
never used
bless
to
you.
have. So yeah, so I think that's that's the thing. Just acknowledging that they're realizing they are exactly the same person, and ultimately, what do we want for our children and for our relatives and for our friends? We want them to be happy and to live their best lives. And and I've lost count of the number of people who've told me that I look so much happier now, and I'm not surprised, because
Oh,
this is the real me. Yeah, it's who I am.
that's true. When you're true to yourself, you're a lot more happier than
Yeah,
uh, uh, putting some kind of mask on
yeah,
you. But on that answer, the cisgender people have to be more understanding and more have to educate themselves on a higher speed. But
absolutely.
sometimes it is hard. And would you agree, or would you disagree with me saying I feel people who are coming out or wanting to make the transition has to be understanding of cisgender people as well, instead of expecting them to accept them
Yeah,
immediately.
I think it would
Um,
help, but it's not easy to do that because at the time you're wrapped up in it. It's such a major thing. It's your life is in such turmoil at the time. It's really hard. You can't really think about anything else at the time. You're just wrapped up in your own little bubble, just trying to get through as best you can. It's really hard. But in hindsight, I wish I'd have cut everybody else a little bit more slack at the time, but
mm,
I was maxed out to the my maximum capacity. I really was. So
Yeah,
it is really
I know,
hard.
I understand that completely. I've been going through that for a different reasons for last 2 months or so.
Mm.
But it is also sometimes I feel when there is any differences or when there is change, I am only comparing it not from the seriousness of the transition. I'm not. What I'm saying might not even touch the surface of that seriousness. But what I'm saying is sometimes we kind of, it is easier for us to blame other person that they don't understand us, they don't do this and they don't do that. I am coming from the racism point of view as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
um they don't understand me, they don't do that, and I am going to go and hang out with friends of my new friends. I
yeah.
don't want to hang out with my old friends, and this kind of friction is also not
Yeah.
helping
No,
cisgender
but
people to accept it. Would you not
but
say that?
absolutely, but it is hard to be understanding when you're being misgendered constantly, and when your relatives are calling you he and him when you're actually she and her, and they're not trying, and it's really hard, and especially when you have. I mean, I've had religious bigotry in my family. I've lost my sister through it, and I had lots of other stuff going on where I've had lots of stuff I've been called all sorts of things. Um, and it's really hard when you have that level of bigotry thrown at you, and it's really hard to then to be understanding of the person who's dealing that with you. It's not easy. It's not easy.
Yeah, I think we've got to think from one person to another person. One cisgender person treating genuinely, they wanted to help, but they are struggling themselves. They are struggling
Yeah.
to
Well,
understand how can I deal with this situation now.
yeah. Well, I think
It's they are in the same situation as you
yeah.
are.
And the thing is, what I always say is a lot of I find most people are lovely people. They're very supportive and they want to do and say the right thing. Most people don't want to upset trans people in any way or anything, and so but so many don't know the right vocabulary, and that they're worried about upsetting trans people. Well, we had
That's
to have our
me.
chat before because you were worried about doing a live before we'd had a chat, weren't you? So I had to
I
sort of
mean,
educate
even
you.
now, I get so uncomfortable. Before I
Yeah,
came on the show, I was like, oh, I should have read that article, which from the LinkedIn, to use the right word. I mean, still, I'm trying to get. That's where I use
yeah,
this normal people quite
but
a lot in this. I don't
yeah,
use that word
yeah,
that
but
often.
yeah, but I think it, if a cisgender person misgenders a trans person. Now, if it's somebody who is normally supportive, supportive most of the time, and gets it right most of the time, we know that we know who's supportive and who isn't.
Yes.
But if they just slip up occasionally, because they've known, like, so, say, if someone's known me for Martin for donkey's years, and they call me Martin or they call me him, it's not an issue. It's not a problem. And, they all they
Ah.
need to do is just apologise and move on. They'll be beating themselves up about it, but they shouldn't do because I'm not bothered. But it's the people who do it continually and deliberately, then that's abuse, and then I won't
And
tolerate
hide
that. So
hide behind the excuse. Hide behind that excuse.
yeah,
I
and
totally
it's a different
understand
thing.
where you're
And the thing
coming
is, as
from.
trans people, we know the people who are supportive and who the people aren't. So, don't beat yourself up. And the thing is that, it's just to get yourself educated, and that's what I do, and that's what I do with my trans awareness training, just to educate people. And hopefully, people have been educated a little bit by today's broadcast.
Yeah, it would be, as like I can be talking to you for ages to get an understanding. It's not easy. You gave us quite a bit of information last time on your interview as well, like where we can go and find these informations. It's so, I am wow inspiring or wow inspiring. I'm trying to fit a word to listening to your story, listening to that some of your interviews is like, how can people go through such a pain of proving to others that their true self is mind-boggling, because why can't we accept a person as they are? Why do we need to put them in a box? All of these questions are, yes, we are all on the journey. All of these questions really bothers me.
Hmm.
Why do we need to teach
And
others to be kind? Why do we
yeah,
need to teach others to behave like a human?
and
Why can't we treat?
it all comes from two things. One, these artificial labels that are put on us, these binary labels that are put on us at birth. We have no choice in that; they're just given to us. That's it. So there's
Yeah.
that. So that needs to change. Don't know if it ever will, but that needs to change. And it's also just the acceptance of people who are different to ourselves. And that's it.
Hmm.
And that's what diversity and inclusion is all about, isn't it? It's just acceptance of people who are different to
Yeah,
yourselves.
I think inclusion has to be defined even more simpler terms than we
Yeah.
say it.
I've often heard it described as diversity is being asked to the party, and inclusion is being asked to dance. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think that sums it up quite well, actually.
that's a very very very
Mm.
diversity is what. Let me put that one.
Diversity
Diversity
is being invited to the
is
party,
being invited to the party.
and inclusion is being invited to dance.
I need to put this one. Sorry, to dance. Oh, that's a very nice one.
And I'm a dancer, and
Oh,
I've
I
got
should
no
put.
intention of stopping dancing.
Oh, let's go on. I've got two left feet. If you're okay pressing and losing your foot, come dance with me. That's my thing. I cannot dance for, oh my god. That's another story. Thank you very much. We've got over an hour. I was thinking I should keep it to 30 minutes, but I can't.
You've got no
I need
chance
to
with me. I talk so much.
it's not just you. I love to listen to your stories. Uh, it is for me when Rachel said to me, you should speak to Katie, and I was like, initially I had this hang up, even though I asked her, I do need to speak to. Initially, what would Katie think that if I ask this question or if I just mess it up? It was not intentional. Sometimes you get to this in your head. Yes, I want to know, and your inquisitiveness of being. I need to know everything in one go. That is not going to happen as well. So whenever I see your post or comment, I was like, now I have more understanding of the pain, even though I knew it. Hypothetically speaking, I knew it would be a pain to tell someone that this is what I am, but I have the understanding and have that, what do you say, knowing of that pain, even though I
Yeah.
have not suffered through that pain, if you know what I mean, is in itself makes me think, oh my God, have I treated someone badly? That is the thought I think I want to get
Mm.
whenever I speak to someone. Did I do something which has hurt someone else in their journey? Thank you very much, really. And one of your statements from the last one is, "We are just the normal people and wanted to be accepted." Why am I saying normal people again?
I'm saying nothing.
It's not intentional.
Well,
Sorry.
from one normal
What was your
person to another,
statement?
thank you.
Oh my God! It's high time I get off this interview. Otherwise, I will be offending many people. Oh my God, it's fun, really fun to be with you, Katie. Really, I'm
Likewise.
learning a lot, and thanks a lot for coming and giving me more than the time which I always say 30 minutes. I say, but it goes over 1 hour. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's
My interviews
easily
usually go
done.
like that.
But it is whatever, you have not wasted any of the words, if you know what I mean.
Thank you. Thank you.
Each and every statement you make, each and every story you share has got something to learn. I only can wish people will listen to it fully and understand the the intricacy of the transition of your journey of your passion to educate other people, to understand one another. And thank you very much, and I'll see you sometime soon again
Yeah. Thanks
with
very much,
another
Sudha.
story.
Yeah. Lovely to see you again.
Thanks, Sebastian, for staying over, and Priscilla. She is from. She's on LinkedIn. She's watching us as well. So it's
Is that
really
Priscilla
nice.
Morris?
Yeah, no, Priscilla. Oh, I forgot her surname. Oh God, this is just.
Oh, sorry. No, sorry. No, it's just.
You would see her
Yeah.
on LinkedIn. I will tag you there as
Oh,
well.
okay.
Priscilla Bennett.
Oh,
Bennett.
it's just that you don't hear of many Priscillas these days. So and that's the Priscilla I know. You see, so that's why I mentioned it.
Oh, Scylla. She goes by Scylla. I really love her name. Um, she, I met her through when I was at my aunt's. So she's really lovely person. Anyway, thank you very much, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Or not tomorrow. What am I talking about? I don't have any interviews signed up next week.
Whenever,
Um,
whatever.
let me behave normal. Let me finish on that note. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Sudha. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi. Hope you all enjoyed that. My craziness just goes in full swing when I'm stressed or when I am just having fun. It could be either one of that. But I really enjoyed Katie with me today. Hope you enjoyed as well. If you've got any questions relating to educating your people, employees, or just wanting to find out how can I be friend, how can I be better human by accepting and including everyone in my daily conversations. That's all I've got to share with you today, and I'll come up with another story next time. And until then, thank you very much, and bye for now.